Welcome to the first ever voice only How Did You podcast. Today we're joined with Paul Farrer, a TV composer. First and foremost, Paul, how would you describe what you do?
Could probably be quite lofty and say media composer, but possibly a more accurate one is TV composer, because I don't do many video game type things, and I don't do many sort of adverty type things. So it's mainly just TV work.
How did you manage to get into the role that you currently do, Paul?
Well, I had a very musical upbringing. I used to sing in the Worcester Cathedral Voluntary Choir. I used to be interested in synthesizers and things that make funny noises and all that sort of stuff. And when I was 16, I left school and started a work experience, sort of a youth training scheme, like an apprenticeship thing in a vocal recording studio, which was sort of mainly doing sort of bands and being a T-boy and setting up sessions and stuff like that. But they also did a few sort of jingles and radio things. And because I'd had a very musical upbringing, I assumed that everyone in the studio would know about music. And they didn't. They were technical people. They knew about miking up a drum kit and stuff. So if ever a job came in that required, me to play the piano or arrange some vocals or something, they'd sort of give it to me, and I'd end up doing it.
You speak about having a musical upbringing and how you're surrounded by lots of different kinds of music. What kind of music did you listen to when you were younger?
Oh, I think there was so much of the music I listened to. It was the music that I was exposed to. So I was in the choir at the cathedral, and so obviously, every week it was this amazing, classical choral music that was, from Mass and stuff like Haydn and various things. But as part of that, we'd also sing in concerts. So we'd be the choir in, they'd be doing, Britain's Sea Symphony or one of these huge, amazing orchestral works. And of course, obviously the way that it works is you've got the orchestra in the, in the pit, and you've got the violins at the front and the brass at the back, and then there's the choir. So I'd be sitting in the front row of the choir, and it would be like, I'd be 3 feet away from the percussion section of the Liverpool Philharmonic or something. It was a pretty formative experience. And I'm sure if you've ever heard a big symphony orchestra in the room, it's an absolutely amazing thing. But to actually be sitting sort of literally in the orchestra while this stuff's happening, it was just absolutely, it was like rocket fuel being poured into my head. And I think around that time I started getting into classical music, but other things. I was really interested in synthesizers, samplers, the early days of sampling. I was really into people like Jean-Michel Jarre and those kind of type stuff. And yeah, I think when I was probably about 9 or 10, I think I went to go and see E.T. or something. I just remember that there was a sort of a moment where it kind of all clicked for me that, when E.T. takes off on his bike, that just the music and the media, the moving image was just absolutely brilliant, and it kind of just blew my mind. And I don't quite know what's happening to me, but I just want to be part of that.
You've previously mentioned who you looked up to. Is there anybody that you look up to currently?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just everybody, basically. Everybody who isn't me seems to be making better music than me. So, I mean, just in my immediate vicinity, the people in my... I think when you're a musician and you create music, you're constantly just looking at what everyone else is doing, and you're constantly... I don't know if you're comparing yourself to them. Well, you probably are comparing yourself to them. But I mean, people like film composers like Hans Zimmer and John Williams and James Newton Howard and Thomas Newman. All these people that I just they're gods amongst men as far as I'm concerned. But also really great innovative stuff happening in the TV landscape. I'm very fortunate to know a lot of the big TV composers, and I love hearing what they come up with, and the sort of camaraderie of sharing sort of like things that we do and things that we say, and the noises that we make. It's really interesting being, noticed by your peers, which is a lovely feeling because, most of the time it's a pretty lonely profession where you sort of sit at home and, terrified that everyone's going to laugh at what you do.
You've received quite a lot of credit for the great theme tunes that you've produced, like Don't Say I'm Nice, The Chase, and things like that. But most recently, it's The Wheel by Michael McIntyre. How did that come about?
It seems to have taken on a life of its own. So The Wheel, I was saying this to some people I knew a couple of weeks ago. It's very strange, The shows that do well, first of all, you have absolutely no idea which shows are going to do well and which ones aren't. The only indicator that I've had across my career is that shows that announce themselves as being, wow, this is going to be good, that have great talent attached to them, have a great production company that you think, wow, this is the job to get. 9 times out of 10, they actually don't. They usually do really badly. The shows that kind of just are quiet and just get on with it, and they're kind of humble, they keep their head down and you do it, and everyone's nice, and it just, suddenly those are the ones that can take off. I mean, a good example being The Weakest Link, when I did that sort of 22 years ago, whenever it was. You know, it didn't announce itself as anything. It was a pilot in the daytime with the ginger-haired woman off points of view. You know, it was just, it didn't announce itself as being big or special in any way, and yet it ended up gobbling the whole planet. And The Wheel was sort of the similar sort of thing. So obviously, I'd worked with Michael McIntyre a lot on the few shows in the past, and I was musical director of his Saturday night show, Michael McIntyre's Big Show, which was a wonderful, wonderful theatre show. And I always used to do the unexpected star track and work with the artists and all that sort of stuff. But obviously with COVID, we couldn't do it. So in the middle of lockdown, Michael came up with this idea of, you know, everyone's socially distanced on this spinning disc, and, you know, how do we get it going? And actually, probably about 80% of my work on The Wheel was timing, you know, sort of engineering schematics to try and get the spin of this thing right, with the effects of the speed up and the slow down. And I had a little idea for a little theme tune. I thought, well, it'd be fun to do something really uncool and funky, like a 90s new Jack Swing thing. And Michael really liked it, and the team really liked it. And then we just made it. We made it in lockdown, and it sort of went out over Christmas, and everyone was sort of locked in. And it just seems to have developed a life of its own. It just absolutely, for some reason, that theme tune just seems to have got under people's skin, and it's become a sort of a meme, and people are mentioning it on Twitter. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. I'm perfectly happy with it. It's a lovely piece of music, and it works well for the context of the show. And I think probably one of the parts of the unique selling part of it is that Michael really loves it, and he's got nothing to do while the wheel's spinning, so he just stands at the wheel and sings along to it, and all the other contestants and the celebrities all sing along to it. So it's like a kind of a knees up sing along down the pub kind of feel to it, which is lovely. I mean, it's hugely complimentary to me. It's very flattering, but I kind of look at it like every other bit of music you do, which is you try your best, you try and get under the skin of the show, and then you finish it and you send it off, and then you forget all about it, really, in a way, and you're on to the next job, and you've already done 3 other jobs by the time that one comes on TV, and you look at it and go, oh, I remember that. And it's sort of, it's quite, you're sort of quite disconnected from it in a way, and it's such a lovely feeling when people, it means something to people or it connects to people, but that's, that's quite rare that happens.
Your IMDb says that your nickname is Ocean Hair. How did that come about?
Well, this is really funny because okay, so that was put by a mate of mine, Paul, who interestingly is a very, very good guitarist who I was working with only 5 days ago. He was playing some guitar on the NBC version that I'm doing some bits for of The Wheel, because Michael's over there at the moment filming the American version of it, and he plays it. And we grew up together. He's an old mate of mine from school, and in the early days of IMDb, I didn't have a clue what it was. I used to have a full head of hair, and he always used to take the mickey out of me because my hair was wavy, so he called me Ocean Hair. And I have absolutely no idea how it got on there other than him putting it on a few years ago. But the point was, I have absolutely no idea how to change it or take it off, so it's just stuck there, which is ironic because I'm a complete slaphead now. I don't hair at all, but just there it is. The internet never forgets. I think there are people that have worse things on the internet they wish they didn't have, but that's mine, so I'm happy with that. I never actually use IMDb. I know everyone swears by it, but I find it a bit confusing. I kind of look at it and go, oh, right. I never put anything of mine. I'm sure it's great, and the times that I've flicked in it, I think, oh, right, I see that there's stuff that I've completely forgotten about that someone's put up there, and I think, oh, okay, that's clever.
You've been working on film since around the 1990s. What genre of film would you work on if you could?
I don't know, really. I mean, films are a sort of different beast unto themselves. I wouldn't describe myself as a film composer, but I did a film last year. I did a big Red Dwarf special, which was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful fun. It was really good, and I enjoyed it. It turned out okay, I think. I think any film or television project there's something a bit unusual, something that's a bit kind of like, that's something I haven't tried before. I think as a composer, you're always looking to try and sort of push yourself into areas that you're not familiar with. I think just as a musical challenge, and even if you're asked to do something in a genre that you're familiar with, I always try and push my clients into areas that they may not have thought. So whether it's kind of like, well, have you thought about doing it like this, or a different time signature, or different instruments, or whatever? And I suppose it's a bit of a tricky one, because ultimately the reason that they're calling you in the first place is because they know you have a real track record of making a certain type of thing for a certain type of show, which is lovely and it's complimentary, but at the same time you kind of want them to embrace that, oh, you can do other things. Have you thought about pushing it in this direction and stuff? So it's kind of it's sort of a mutual trust thing, where you're sort of trying to hold each other's hand and just move into different areas, that are sort of perhaps unexpected, or could be fun, could be different.
Oh, definitely. You've always got to have your own kind of creative flair. But talking about that, you've worked on lots of different genres, from Coronation Street at Christmas to Beat the Chasers. What kind of differences is there between the kind of genres that you work in? Is there any?
Yeah, they're totally different. I mean, which ones I prefer? I mean, I prefer anything that gives you a bit of time and space to experiment with new things, anything that allows you to work with new people, particularly live instrumentalists. Not a lot of, not all jobs have that time and space to be able to get a big orchestra in, for example, but some of them do. And you look at things like playing around with the Coronation Street theme, or dramas, or all those sort of things. They all have their own sort of unique sort of challenge, and that kind of any job that, I'll put it like this, any job that you sort of have to bolt in some other musicians is always good. So any show that allows you to bolt in some really interesting players, or do something interesting that you haven't done before, like things like Ninja Warrior, that was a big orchestra. The Chase was a real string section. Done other things that are more guitar based, or brass sections, or whatever. So it's all very, anything that gives you variety and gives you the time and the space to really roll your sleeves up and have a collaborative musician process. I think those are the ones. But obviously, because it's music for a particular thing, the most important thing is being true to the genre. So what your approach to Beat the Chasers would be different to your approach to Emmerdale or Coronation Street, or Anti-Deck thing or something. It's always about serving the narrative of whatever's in front of you. But that can be comedy, some of it could be entertainment, some of it could be drama, it could be all sorts of things.
Paul, if you had to choose a TV show which was your favourite, which one would it be?
Which one do I like to work on? Which do I like to play? Well, the honest answer is I don't really watch very much television. I watch hardly anything. I'm too busy reading, a bit of a dweeb. The shows I like to work on, honestly, the shows I like to work on are the shows that have the best people working on them. Good producers, interesting creative people doing interesting creative things, and people who trust you, people who say, let's go on this journey together, what can you do? Those are always the best shows. And actually the genre of it doesn't really matter, because, there could be, whatever it is, that you can find some joy and some originality and some art in it, whether it's a celebrity ice skating thing, or whether it's a big, heavy, dark, serious quiz, or whatever it is. There's always fun to be had. There's always creativity to be had.
Let's go back to the orchestral sound that you mentioned that you love working in. How did you find the experience of working in 1,000 Heartbeats?
Well, yeah, I mean, 1,000 Heartbeats was a very different experience, because it was my show. I came up with the idea for it. So it was sort of I was in the weird position of being the composer for a show that I'd invented. So all of the music was specific to, the things that were going on in the various rounds. And I was also on screen waving my arms around with the quartet. So that was, first and foremost, it was I spent so long writing music for quiz shows that I kind of thought, well, I want to create a quiz show now to get me some music. So, and it was just a different way of approaching that. And ITV liked it, and we got a couple of series out of it, and it seemed to do very well. And it's currently being made in Philippines and somewhere else as well. But the point is, as a show, it was really exciting for me to have a live string quartet there, because I just thought what you can do with that musically in terms of tempo and up and down and having fun with it and building expression and tension and all those other key elements that you need in a quiz show. It's so great to have it there. And most of the TV people I was talking to were so amazed that you could even do that. What you mean, you could speed something up while you're playing it, and I was kind of like, yeah, that's so obvious to a musician. But of course, if you didn't know that, you wouldn't know that. So no, it was great. It was a really fun project to do. I learned an awful lot about the mechanics of TV. Which is great, which is always fun.
Continuing on with misconceptions, what is, you would say, the biggest misconception that people have of your day-to-day job?
common misconception is that people always equate the bit of TV that they see, which is obviously famous people and sort of tabloidy celebrity type world. They equate that with all levels of the people that work on it. And obviously, the famous person in front of the camera is really just 5% of what's going on in a show. But we're all working to sell the lie. We sell the lie that Bradley Walsh thinks up the questions on The Chase. That is the lie. In other words, they're just popping out of his mouth, and of course they're not. They've got a team of question writers and the people who are doing the sets, the people who are doing the legal affairs, the script writing, the lighting, the direction, the editing, all this sound dubbing, all these sort of things. And these people who work in these are fascinating areas. All these different genres are absolutely fascinating. I remember going to the George Lucas soundstage at Elstree Studios when we filmed Dancing on Ice, and just when you sit there in the audience, there's these guys who sort of just before it gets going, they roll these little tiny sort of ropey ladders down from the ceiling, and sort of about half a dozen guys climb up them and sit in these little chairs high up in the roof. I mean, there must be like 200 feet above everything, and they control the sort of super trooper lights that sort of beam and follow the celebrities around the ice. And you just think, just seeing that there's a discipline there of people who do that for a living, you think, my God, you would never even think of that when you're watching TV, and just seeing all these, just the sheer technicality of what goes on behind the scenes. To me personally, it's just such a fascinating thing to meet these people and talk to them. And of course, they are as specialist in their area as you are in yours. So I spend my entire life, thinking about oboes and reverbs and, mastering units and EQ and all this sort of stuff, in the same way that they are completely obsessed with their corner of the craft. And I think that's a lovely thing to experience, and to see, the depth of talent at all levels of these things.
You've been in the Royal Variety Performance for multiple years now. Alongside that, biggest TV show theme tunes that we've heard. Is there a moment in your head that sticks out?
The honest truth is, when we talk about, things that are successful, there's different ways of measuring it. There's success as in, how many people have ever heard it. You look at something like The Weakest Link was like 97 countries or something. You think the number of people that have ever heard The Weakest Link must be in the numbers of billions of people. Is that what we call success, or is success something that you're personally proud of? In other words, you have you've written a piece and it just means something to you. And for example, there's quite a few pieces that I've written that I think, oh yeah, that's really good, and yet they're not appropriate for what I'm working on, or perhaps no one's ever heard them, and perhaps no one ever will. So in terms of my own personal satisfaction, it's totally up in the air. It's always lovely when anyone kind of recognises something you've done, or they ask you what you do, and you tell them, well, I work on these type of shows, and they go, oh, I watch that. And it's really interesting. On my YouTube channel, I've got some people who comment on people comment on YouTube clips, obviously, and it's so interesting the number of the comments about the shows. The vast majority of them, particularly shows like Weakest Link and The Chase, are relating to sort of familiarity. I always used to watch this at my nan's after school, or all this sort of stuff. And it's so interesting the way that people receive television, that it's sort of they invite it into their homes, and it means a lot to them. With all these things, it's about taking the lead from the show. So Michael, for example, with the wheel, that's a perfect example. Is the wheel spins round; it must spin around 20 times an episode or whatever. And there's a worry that maybe we could break it up a bit with something to do and do something different. In America, I've just spent the last 6 weeks working quite closely with the team in Los Angeles who are making the new version over there, and we've done a ton of those. So basically, all of my work is taking the wheel theme and just having fun with it, doing it, and stretching it into loads of different genres. So they'll have a guest that is a particular of a celebrity guest, and then we warp the theme into something that's a little musical nod in their direction and stuff, and that's great fun. I mean, that's really good fun. So we did it in the UK, we did it with Chris's one, I think we did 8-bit one, I think we did a couple of others, and so in America we're just doing basically that, but more and more, and I think it's lovely. I mean, it's great because to me it brands the show with still keeping the music around, but it allows us to have fun with it. And this is entertainment, it is fun. A lot of it is fun, and I think that the fun of the music kind of reflects on the show, and Michael feeds off the fun of that, which kind of makes everyone kind of get the joke again. So it's a nice thing to do if we can do it.
More frequently than not, you're always invited back to the Royal Variety Performance year on year. How does it feel to be composing music in front of the royal family members like the Queen?
Well, I mean, to me, when I got the job in 2012, and I remember kind of just, I mean, obviously we've all grown up seeing the Royal Variety Performance, but I didn't really know much about it and the history, so I sort of poked around on the internet, and I was like, absolutely flabbergasted because 2012, the reason that they brought me in was they wanted to do a big orchestral special at the Royal Albert Hall, and it was like a big thing. The Queen and Prince Philip were going to be there, and it was the 100th anniversary, and I was like, oh my god, well let's have a look at the history. And I was sort of going back, looking at the people who were done my job in the past, and it was just absolute musical titans going back to I think like 1917 or something like that. Like Edward Elgar did it.
Wow.
To me, the idea of like being asked to do a job that the once had been done by, I mean, I was embarrassed. I was thinking, you sure you got the right number? Well, I can't do that. But they sort of told me about it, and they told me what they wanted, and I did a lot of music, and they loved it, and they thought it was great, and I mean, then we get there, the Albert Hall, and there's Dave Arch and his orchestra there, and playing it all and recording it all, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. It was just a really magical time, and yeah, I mean, I've done it now. Since then, so what is it, like 8, 9 years or something? So yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously COVID's kind of made it a little bit strange, but I'm sure this year we'll be back up to speed again, or maybe we won't. I don't know how it's going to work. But the point is, it's it's a privilege. I mean, it's a real privilege. I mean, it's one of those things that's like, wow, real feather in your cap time. But actually, at the same time, it's a lovely thing to have been a part of because. It's live music. It's sort of, you get to sort of be quite regal and fun and showbiz, which is another, set of adjectives that are always good to play with.
Throughout your career, you must have had the opportunity to turn things down. Have you ever had a regret of doing this?
Yeah, I have sort of turned a few things down that have then gone on to do quite well. And I very, very rarely do I listen to what the other person who did the music did. And it's very rare that I look at that and go, yeah, I could have done better than that. Most of the time, I'm like, oh no, they actually did it really well. They got the right person for the job there, and that in a way, this sort of I don't know, I believe in karma, but that kind of way that it's sort of the project finds the person, or the person finds the project. That you kind of like. When I look back over the sphere of the range of stuff I've done, I have no regrets about the things that I didn't get or that I didn't do because I always look at them and go, there's if I had to swap all the projects I have done for the projects that I missed, I'm very happy with the ones that I have done. And I think that's the best you can say. So overall, you come out on top, but there are a few you just think, I wish I could have done that, or I would have liked to have done that, or I'd like to have fun with it. But at the same time, you can't live in that world of the path not taken, because ultimately you look at the thing and you just go, yeah, they did a good job there. There's a couple where I look at them and I go, yeah, I think I could have probably nailed it better than that, but very few.
What kind of position do you see yourself in a year's time?
Oh, stuck in the studio in a dark room with no windows and sort of, lack of sleep and so but I don't know. I mean, honestly I never ever predict things, or I never anticipate things. I mean, as a composer, you are quite passive about the stuff you do. If I always say, anytime anyone rings you up and says, "Could you make some music for me?" It's a privilege, and I think if you the moment you stop feeling very honoured to be part of these huge projects, then it's probably time to quit. And I still haven't ever lost that sense of urgency, or that sense of fun, or that hunger to try something new and try and get a project off the ground, or something like that. It's still a great feeling, that idea of, and also because these things are so huge, they're so expensive, these programs, these projects, these series, that they're fast, and they've got so many moving parts and so many amazing people working on them. You think, it's a privilege to be asked to contribute and to be part of something that's bigger than you are. So in a year's time, if I'm